Hello and welcome to Lost Love Mystery, where we explore the twists and turns of love, the pain of betrayal, and the mysteries that lie hidden in the heart. The living room, once warm and full of life, now felt like a cold, empty shell. She sat across from me, not with anger or even sadness, but with a detached indifference that hit me harder than I ever expected. Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed, as she spoke the words that shattered my world. I don't need you anymore. I'm better off alone. For a moment, my mind refused to process what she had just said. It was as if my brain couldn't connect the dots, refusing to believe that this was real. What are you saying? I asked, hoping, praying that I had misunderstood. But she left no room for doubt. I want out. This marriage isn't working for me. Honestly, I've been thinking about this for a while. Her words hit me like a freight train. The air felt sucked out of the room, leaving me gasping for understanding. I searched her face for hesitation, for regret, anything to tell me this wasn't final. But there was nothing. No anger, no sadness, just emptiness. Had she been carrying this decision in her heart for months while I remained oblivious? I tried to reason with her. We've been together for years. We built a life together. If something's wrong, we can fix it. You can't just throw this away. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. I wasn't ready to lose everything. Her response was ice cold. That's just it. I don't want to fix it. I've already made up my mind. I need to focus on myself now. She stood up and walked toward the bedroom, leaving me sitting there, stunned, broken. This was the woman I loved, the woman I trusted, the woman I had shared my life with. And now, just like that, I was no longer a part of her future. The days that followed were a blur. She was methodical about everything, packing her things, dividing up our belongings, even drafting an email to confirm the split, as if it were a business transaction. There was no emotion on her end, no second thoughts. For me, it felt like grieving the death of someone still alive. And the worst part? She didn't seem to care. The night she left, she didn't even say goodbye. Just a simple, take care. And then she was gone. I sat in the silence of our now empty apartment, trying to make sense of it all. I replayed every moment, every conversation, wondering how I had missed the signs. Had I done something wrong? Had I not done enough? That first night alone was brutal. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I just sat there, drowning in a flood of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. But looking back, that night was just the beginning. At first, the silence in the apartment was unbearable. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator, felt deafening. But as much as I was suffocating in my grief, something inside me refused to let go completely. I needed to know, was she really happier without me? That curiosity led me straight to my phone. I hadn't unfollowed her on social media yet. I wasn't ready for that. And then there it was. A picture, a wide smile, a glass of wine in her hand, surrounded by friends at a rooftop bar. The caption read, "Here's to new beginnings." The comments flooded in, supportive, enthusiastic, showering her with compliments about her newfound freedom. It felt like a knife twisting in my chest. The posts kept coming. Fancy brunches, weekend getaways, yoga sessions, pictures of her laughing with people I'd never seen before. She was painting a picture of a flawless new life, one that screamed, "Look how amazing I'm doing without you." And I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. While she was flaunting her freedom, I was left picking up the pieces of the life we once had, haunted by the whys and what-ifs. But something about it all felt off, too polished, too calculated. This wasn't the woman I had been married to. She used to hate yoga. She used to roll her eyes at those rooftop bars, calling them pretentious. None of it felt real. Then the cracks in her facade started to show. A mutual friend reached out, hesitant but concerned. "Hey, I don't mean to pry, but is she okay? She's been going out a lot. Like, every night. It just seems off." It was the first hint that something wasn't adding up. And then I started hearing more. She had fallen in with a new crowd, people who didn't exactly have her best interests at heart. Late-night parties, questionable relationships, a desperate need to prove something to herself, to me. And then, the photo. Someone sent it to me from one of her nights out. This time, she wasn't smiling. She wasn't posing for the camera. She looked lost, sitting there, staring off into the distance, her drink untouched. For a brief moment, I felt pity. But then, something shifted inside me. Her new life wasn't about thriving. It was about running. From what? I didn't know yet. But it wasn't freedom she had found. It was avoidance. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had left, claiming she was better off alone. But everything she did screamed the opposite. While she was spiraling into a whirlwind of distractions, I was here, slowly, painfully, rebuilding. I wasn't living an Instagram-worthy life. But my pain? At least it was real. And then came the final proof. A coworker, someone who had seen us together at company events, asked me casually over coffee, "How's she doing?" I saw her the other night at that new bar downtown. She didn't look too great. The words stuck with me, because this wasn't the first time someone had mentioned seeing her out. And the pattern was always the same. Late nights, heavy drinking, an exhaustion that no Instagram filter could hide. Then, the message. From one of her old friends. "Hey, I don't mean to overstep, but I'm worried about her. She's been acting strange, and I thought you should know." Attached was a screenshot of a text conversation between them. In it, my ex admitted something she would never say out loud. She was struggling. She felt isolated. She wasn't sure if she had made the right decisions. Reading those words brought a strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated, proof that her freedom wasn't the victory she wanted everyone to believe. But another part of me felt something else, something I wasn't expecting. Sadness. I never wanted her to be unhappy. I just wished she had been honest about it, about everything, instead of pretending she was untouchable. The more I learned, the clearer everything became. It wasn't just about her new social life. She was struggling badly. She had underestimated how expensive it would be to maintain the lifestyle she was trying to portray. Fancy nights out, designer clothes, trips. It all added up. And without the financial stability we had built together, she was drowning. Then there were her new friends, the ones she had traded me in for. Mutual friends who still talked to her told me about the growing tension in her circle. These weren't lifelong friends, people who genuinely cared about her. They were just acquaintances, fickle and opportunistic. One friend even told me about a night when she was left stranded after a petty argument, forced to call an Uber at 2 a.m. That wasn't the kind of independence she claimed she wanted. But what really hit me was something a mutual friend said over coffee one day. "I don't think she knows who she is right now. She's trying so hard to be someone else, someone she thinks she should be. And it's not working." That stuck with me. It explained so much of what I had been seeing. She wasn't just trying to prove something to the world. She was trying to prove something to herself. And failing. While her life seemed to spiral out of control, mine was taking a different path. I wasn't chasing distractions or trying to mask my pain. I was facing it. And in doing so, I started to rebuild. Little by little, I reclaimed my confidence. I went back to the gym. I threw myself into work. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who had always been there. I didn't post about it on social media. I didn't need to. I was making progress, and that was enough. The more I learned about her situation, the more I felt something unexpected. Clarity. The life she left behind wasn't the problem. It was her inability to confront her own unhappiness. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't the one who needed to change. The cracks in her carefully curated life widened until they became full-blown fractures. The stories I'd been hearing, the late nights, the financial strain, the shallow friendships, were just the beginning. Her attempt at reinvention had been crumbling for weeks. Now, it was impossible to ignore. Then, one day, a message from a mutual friend landed in my inbox. "You're not going to believe what just happened." She had shown up at a party, dressed to impress, still clinging to the image she had built. But things went south, fast. She got into an argument with some guy she had been seeing casually. Apparently, he humiliated her in front of everyone, calling her out for the way she acted. And instead of fighting back, she broke down and left in tears. That was the moment people started to see what I had seen all along. Her confidence was paper thin. It was all an act. And now, the act was falling apart. I'd like to say that hearing all this brought me satisfaction, but it didn't. If anything, I felt a strange mix of pity and relief. Pity, because no one deserves to hit rock bottom like that. Relief, because it reinforced what I had already accepted. I couldn't have saved her from this. No matter how hard I tried, this was hers to navigate, not mine to fix. And the fallout wasn't just social. Her finances were in worse shape than I thought. She had to move out of the apartment she had rented after leaving me. She couldn't afford it. She had no choice but to downsize. Smaller place, fewer luxuries, fewer distractions. She stopped posting as much on social media. And when she did, her captions took on a defensive, almost desperate tone. Like she was trying to convince herself that everything was fine. Sometimes life just challenges you to grow. That's what she wrote under a photo of an empty coffee cup and a journal. But the comments were fewer now. The likes came mostly from strangers. The people she had surrounded herself with, they had moved on. And in those quiet moments, when the noise of her curated life faded, I realized something. She wasn't thriving. She was surviving. Meanwhile, I had stopped surviving. I was thriving. My career was taking off. My friendships were stronger. And for the first time in a long time, I was actually excited about the future. I wasn't flaunting it. I was just living it. Then, one day, I got the text. "Can we talk?" Her name flashed on my screen for the first time in weeks. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel excitement. Just curiosity. What could she possibly have to say after everything? What was left to discuss? Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet. A small part of me wanted to hear her out, if only to see what she thought she could salvage from the mess she created. We met at a quiet cafe near my office, a place we used to go during our marriage. She was already seated when I arrived, nervously stirring a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. When she looked up and saw me, her face was a mix of relief and hesitation, like she wasn't sure I would even show up. She looked different, tired, almost fragile. The confident, carefree persona she had been flaunting was completely gone. "I'm sorry," she blurted before I even sat down. "I know I don't deserve your time, but I need to say this." I sat down, keeping my face neutral. I wasn't about to make this easy for her. She started talking, a rambling mix of apologies and explanations. She admitted she had underestimated how much she relied on me, not just financially, but emotionally. "I thought I needed to be on my own to find myself," she said, her voice cracking. "But all I found was how much I threw away." She talked about how hard the past few weeks had been, how the friends she leaned on disappeared, how the lifestyle she tried to maintain drained her completely, how she had spent night after night alone, wondering where it all went wrong. And then she admitted it. She had been wrong to think leaving me would fix her unhappiness. I let her speak. I let her get it all out. And when she was done, she looked at me, waiting, maybe hoping. But I had nothing left to give. There was no anger in me, no bitterness, just certainty. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. Without a word, I stood up, left enough cash to cover my coffee, and walked away. She called after me. I didn't look back, because I wasn't hers to lose anymore. "It wasn't you," she said quietly. "It was me." I didn't interrupt. I just listened. A part of me had expected to feel some satisfaction, to revel in her regret. But I felt nothing. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad either. I had moved past all of that. Her words, though heartfelt, didn't change anything for me. They were too little, too late. Then came the part one had seen coming. "I want us to try again," she whispered, her voice barely holding together. "I know I don't deserve it, but I want to fix what I broke. Please." She reached across the table, as if to take my hand, but I pulled back. "I can't," I said simply. She froze, her face crumbling. "You're sorry now, and I believe you mean it. But I've spent these past months rebuilding my life, and I've realized something. I'm better off without you." I expected those words to sting her, but instead, they landed with an odd sense of acceptance. She nodded, her eyes welling with tears. "I understand," she murmured. I had to try." We sat there for a moment in silence before I stood up. "Take care of yourself," I said, then walked out the door. As I stepped outside, I felt something unexpected, a sense of closure. It wasn't the triumphant kind of closure I once imagined. No grand moment of justice or vindication. It was something quieter, something freeing. I had let her speak, but I had also made my decision. And as I walked back to my office, I felt lighter. The weight of her betrayal, the anger, the confusion, it was all gone. I wasn't tied to her anymore. Not in love, not in anger, not in regret. I was free. That evening, I found myself reflecting on everything I had been through. The pain, the sleepless nights, the self-doubt. As much as it had hurt, it had also forced me to rebuild myself, to reclaim my confidence, my sense of worth. And in doing so, I realized something incredible. I was capable of more than I ever gave myself credit for. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. I had a big presentation at work, one I had been preparing for weeks, and it went better than I could have hoped. My boss even pulled me aside afterward, hinting at a potential promotion. But it wasn't just the success that mattered. It was how I felt during it, confident, sure of myself, like I was finally becoming the man I was always meant to be. Later that day, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from her. "Thank you for listening." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I turned my attention to something else, or rather, someone else. There was a woman I'd been getting to know at work. She was younger, full of energy, sharp-witted, kind. Our conversations had become the highlight of my days. That night, we had plans for dinner. And for the first time in years, I felt genuinely excited about what could come next. As I got ready, I glanced at the mirror. The man staring back at me wasn't the same one who had once begged his wife to stay. He wasn't the man who spent sleepless nights scrolling through her social media, trying to make sense of her choices. That version of me was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, more grounded, happier. Dinner that night was effortless. We laughed, talked about everything from travel to life goals, and for once, I felt no weight of the past pressing down on me. No ghosts of what had been. When I got home, I took one last look around my apartment, the space I had rebuilt, filled with things that made me happy. She had been right about one thing. I was better off alone, but not in the way she had imagined. I wasn't wallowing. I wasn't bitter. I was thriving, building a life I was proud of, surrounding myself with people who truly valued me. And for the first time, I realized I didn't regret meeting her, and I certainly didn't regret letting her go. Because in the end, losing her had been the best thing that ever happened to me. It gave me the chance to find myself again, and maybe, just maybe, someone even better.